listening to the IELTS podcast. Learn from tutors and ex-examiners who are masters of IELTS preparation. Your host, Ben Worthington.
So I guess you were listening to the podcast for quite a while.
Yeah, well, the thing is, I was listening for quite a while, and because I had nothing to do, so I was just doing on my spare time, and then after listening for quite a while, I'm like, wait a minute, this is actually really good information. I should write it down.
Hello there, IELTS students. In this tutorial, we are looking at Part 3 speaking topics for 2020. We're going to be specifically looking at Part 3 questions seen around the web and also sent in from students on our speaking course or on our writing course. And they've seen these questions while they were doing their exams. And I've just prepared a few sample answers. And throughout the tutorial, I'll be sharing certain techniques that you can use. And I'll also just review some special vocabulary that I was using in my answer. Let's jump straight into it. So quite one topic we got was happy occasions. Happy occasions. Now here's the question. How do people in your country celebrate happy occasions? Now the first way I could answer this would be usually in my country, England, people often celebrate happy occasions by either throwing a party or having a barbecue. I guess it depends on the season. Personally, I really love the barbecue parties because, as you know, you need decent weather for a barbecue, and decent weather is exceptionally rare in England. So if the happy occasion, if the party can be combined with a barbecue, and obviously there'll be good weather, it kind of makes for a truly special event. And that would probably be enough for that answer. Just a few sentences. And even though I could probably go further, but in that answer, I mentioned something unique. I developed the answer. I said why. I gave one or two options, and then I developed one of them. And this is what the examiner wants to see. Just a little bit of spontaneity in your answer and also the development. So let's do another question. Why do occasions usually make people happy? Well, I guess occasions or special events probably make people happy because they are not that common, and it's a change from a normal routine. And also, I guess you are given the license to relax a little bit, to possibly be a little bit silly and just a break from the norm. For example, at my nephew's christening just a few months ago, we kind of had a party afterwards, and my dad came with a long blonde wig, and the people who hadn't seen him for a while thought that he'd grown his hair. And it was quite funny because a few minutes afterwards, he took it off and surprised everybody with his bald head. So I guess that's what makes it happy. We get the opportunity to do something different, and it's also something special that we obviously don't do every single day. So yeah, in that answer, hopefully you saw I gave myself a little bit of an intro. I said, well, I guess, which is useful because it allows me to just collect my thoughts and think of an answer. Second, I gave a few different reasons. Even though I did think the question was silly. and it was very similar to the question beforehand. But as you know, we're going to be kind of repeating the same topic over and over and over again, especially in part 3. So you don't want to look at the examiner and think, hey, you just asked me this a few seconds ago. You've just got to ride with it. You just got to go with it and develop it. And in this answer, I gave a few different reasons, and then I gave an example, i.e. my dad, and then I kind of gave like a summary, just to signal that it had finished, that my talk or my answer had finished. Let's move on. How important is the money spent on the occasion for making people happy? Again, how important is the money spent on the occasion for making people happy? Well, I guess this is kind of a controversial topic because, I don't know, maybe you've got two different families. One is slightly more well off than the other family, and it could make the slightly poorer family a little bit uncomfortable. I guess as a general rule of thumb, I wouldn't say it's that important, and maybe making it important could make other families a little bit uncomfortable. However, just to summarize, I don't think it's that important. I think having fun and creating, a peaceful, fun, entertaining environment with, some games and some activities and some opportunities for people just to, play games and maybe get a little bit silly. I think those are the important factors, especially for the children. So, just to end my answer, I don't think it's that important. I think there's a whole list of other factors that are considerably more important than the money. However, obviously, having a lot of money at the event would probably make it easier. So there we go. That was my answer. I kind of summarized it. I put in a little bit contradiction at the end. I mean, in academic writing, I generally discourage students from doing that, from putting a however at the end, because it just seems like a contradiction. But in speaking, we can be a little bit more relaxed. We're not given a formal presentation. It's not a casual event, but it is English speaking, and speaking in its essence is usually spontaneous. And again, I in this answer, I said my honest personal opinion. I said obviously it helps, but it's not the most important thing. And I gave a reason why it's not the most important thing. Next question. Again, very similar to the last one. Is it a good idea to spend a lot of money on a birthday party? Is it a good idea to spend a lot of money on a birthday party? To be honest, I don't really think spending a lot of money at a birthday party or on a birthday party is terribly important. As I said before, I think ideally the most important factor is having the people you care about around, and also creating that happy, relaxed environment. I mean, spending a lot of money on a birthday party could make it more entertaining, I've heard about parties that hire a bouncy castle, that hire clowns, that hire special magicians, and they probably make it more entertaining. But I guess at the end of the day, especially for children, just having a fun environment, and fun can come from creativity, not just from, in essence, throwing money at it. So I guess it helps, but I don't think it is essential. So here, as I said before, I'm getting the same question pretty much asked again. And how do I respond? Well, I take it a different direction. I talk about a children's birthday party. Now, you will have heard a little bit of repetition talking about the environment, but I quickly recognized that, and I tried to take it towards a child's birthday party celebration, because I thought that was the quickest and the easiest route to go. Especially because it's usually at kids' birthday parties where the parents might splash out or might spend lavishly on such things as bouncy castles and clowns and magicians and so on and so forth. By the way, that's good topic-specific vocabulary there. It's very relevant to birthday parties. Final question. Is happiness today the same as it was in the past? Well, this is a rather philosophical question, and I've never really thought about happiness, if I'm totally honest. However, I think it is. I cannot imagine happiness being all that similar to what it was in the medieval times, for example. I guess we just celebrate it differently. Maybe in the past, happiness was having a full fridge of food, or a full larder, or whatever, a full pantry of food, or a full pile of food, maybe. Whereas today, that's kind of, in most places in the world, it's a given. So I guess happiness might be broadband internet, or the full day just to yourself, to play with your gadgets, to play with your devices. It's obviously a very difficult question to answer, and so just to summarize, I guess it is, but it's just measured. It's different elements to it nowadays, compared to the past. So you can see these questions are, in each step, they're getting progressively more difficult. And this one was a really tricky question, but I'm guessing it was really testing my use of comparing different times, so my use of tenses, and to hypothesize as well. And I had to think on my feet then. I wanted to say maybe happiness in the past was a full fridge of food, but then I quickly realized they didn't have fridges in the medieval times, so I changed it to a larder or a pantry, and then quickly changed it to a pile of food. But either way, I think the examiner would have spotted that, and also I just gave it quite a list of vocabulary there related to, the different factors. And also because I could hear myself going off a little bit, I just wanted to bring it round and summarize it at the end, just to signal to the examiner that I had finished. Also, what I will do is make a structure, and this way it'll help you memorize the structure or remember the structure, and you can use it in your next answers. So let's go. Making plans. So imagine I've just answered a QCAD about making plans. I've got lots of vocabulary in my mind, and I probably don't want to repeat this, so this is where the band 7s and the band 8s and the band 9 starts getting separated from each other. So let's go. How do people usually make plans? I guess people usually make plans depending on the situation. For example, if you're if you're traveling, doing a road trip, you might make plans based on the weather, based on distances, based on preferences. Whereas if you're making plans for your day to make it productive, then I guess you'll have a list. And personally, I usually make a list of my tasks, and then I prioritize them, and then I work through them. So in short, I guess it depends what your objectives are and the other restraints, such as weather, enjoyment, money, and importance. Okay, so in that one, I made a comparison there. I gave 2 examples, I compared them, and then I summarized again. Okay, Next one. Should you get advice when making plans? Well, getting advice for making plans sounds like a logical thing to do, I guess, but it also depends on the plans. You know, if I'm planning a holiday, I guess I would ask around, ask my friends and family, hey, what do you know about Crete? Have you ever been to Crete? Or where would you go? Croatia or Spain, for example. But for other plans, maybe I wouldn't ask them. For example, if I was doing my financial planning, I would prefer to speak with an expert on that rather than friends and family, because this is a serious matter and they will have a much greater depth of knowledge. So just to summarize, I guess I get advice when it's an important topic where expertise is required, but if it's more casual, I'll get advice as well. But I guess the important thing is always to take it with a pinch of salt. So yeah, that's my advice. That's my answer on getting advice regarding plans. Yeah, so in that answer, I gave 2 examples again. And also I got a little idiomatic expression in there, take it with a pinch of salt, which basically means don't follow the advice blindly, which is also what I talk about in our tutorials. I'm saying, okay, look, try this advice. If it works for you, that's fantastic. If not, try some other advice. It's up to you. You're responsible, you're intelligent, and you can find out what works for you. Anyway, moving on. Who is the best advisor for big plans? Who is the best advisor for big plans? I guess the best advisor for big plans for me would possibly be my dad. However, it's a bit ambiguous as to what big plans mean. Does it mean where I'm going to live? Does it mean where I'm going to invest money? Does it mean where I'm going to apply for a job? I guess it's all relative. However, in most instances, I'll usually ask my dad, and sometimes I'll even suggest it to my mum. However, the advice from my mum usually tends to be a little bit more on the safe side, whereas my dad's, I think, more ambitious. However, I guess the best advisor for me personally is somebody who knows me inside out, probably knows my weaknesses and knows my strengths. So yeah, for me personally, it's probably somebody within my family as well. So yeah, I guess that's kind of contradicts what I said before, because I do have advisors for other matters. But on a personal level, for personal big plans, it has to be family. Also a few smart friends that I have. Okay, so again, you can hear there's this overlap with the questions. And I kind of acknowledge that maybe I contradicted myself according to my previous answer. So I did acknowledge that, but I also kind of referenced it. I was like, okay, for personal ones, it's this. But for financial matters, maybe it might be this. So don't worry about doing that. And don't worry if you are repeating yourself, but at least try and clarify it. Likewise, if you are contradicting yourself, at least try and clarify it, just so it doesn't seem like you're contradicting what you said previously. And remember, as well, these questions are kind of designed just to make you test your ability to talk about the topic from different angles and with different vocabulary as well. So, final question. How important is the public in helping governments make plans? Well, this is a very tricky and possibly even philosophical question. I guess we could even take this back to the times of philosophers such as Socrates and Plato and Aristotle. It's possibly a question of democracies as well. So it's really quite a difficult one. I guess the public is very important. And I guess if the public's not happy, then maybe they can voice their concern by, I don't know, getting into contact with the representatives. Also, I guess, just to summarize the answer, I think the public is very important in helping governments to make plans. But on the other side as well, sometimes it takes a strong central government to push through big projects, especially infrastructure projects, where the public might not see the long-term benefit. To answer your question, this is a very difficult topic for me personally. So I guess it really depends on what kind of plans the governments are making. There we go. So that was a kind of a cop-out, as in I didn't really want to give a firm answer there, so I took the easy option of just saying, I guess it depends. It doesn't really matter, by the way. We have to bear in mind that this is a language exam. The examiner has really no interest in the content of my answer. The examiner is just really looking for my language ability, and saying it depends is fine. It's a slippy answer, a slimy answer. It's a kind of answer politicians give. They don't really answer the question directly, but it's okay for IELTS. This is a language exam. The examiner wants to know my speaking ability, not my views on governments making plans and public input. So don't worry about that. Okay, final one. So just to summarize, throughout my previous answers, I've been trying to give two reasons or two viewpoints, trying to compare them. And I'm usually also giving examples and giving summaries. All of these help me to build my answer. They help me to develop my answer. And also they encourage the use of vocabulary in those answers as well, especially giving examples. So let's carry on. Public transportation. Do old or young people use public transportation more? I guess, from my personal experience, I usually saw more old people on public transportation and then the very young. So the people who are probably too old to drive or own a car because of safety or financial reasons, and then the very young, maybe like the 15, 14, 13-year-olds who were too young to own a car but still needed to get into town or, travel to the next village. So I guess it's both ends of the spectrum. From my personal experience of living in a village in the north of England, if I remember correctly, it was usually two extremes, who were using the buses, trains and trams more than other people. So there, once again, I didn't want to use public transportation. So what did I use instead? I used buses, trains and trams. Likewise, I used a personal example. I just thought back to when I was like 15 years old and getting on the bus. I didn't see that many middle-aged people, but I definitely saw lots of people my age and then lots of old-age pensioners. In fact, now that I think about it, in the UK, if you're over 60, I think you get a free public transport pass. So that would have been worthwhile to mention as well. Anyway, next question. What are the drawbacks of private vehicles? I guess the disadvantages of private vehicles are numerous. There's the cost, there's the environmental impact, there's the pollution, such as, the contaminated fumes, especially from diesel cars. Also, I guess it kind of gives the advantages to only one section of society. For example, If a poor person wants to apply for a job in a village outside of town, then it kind of makes it more difficult for them unless they've got a car. So they're kind of in the negative cycle. So just to bring it back to the question, one of the drawbacks of private vehicles is that it makes it an unfair playing field for people without those private vehicles. Those are just a few reasons off the top of my head. So yeah, that would be my answer to that question. Yeah, I felt myself going off topic there, talking about job opportunities. So that's why I had to bring it back again and just remind the examiner that, hey, one of the drawbacks of private vehicles, apart from the list I've just mentioned, are that you could say it gives some people an unfair advantage when applying for jobs because they've got a greater range of mobility. It was but it was slightly off topic, but I rescued it. I brought it back on topic and rescued that answer. Also, hopefully you will have heard I did go into list mode as well, which isn't a bad thing. It's just an easy way to boost your vocabulary. So I'm talking about environmental problems, pollution, traffic, and then for some reason I decided to develop the idea of unfair advantage for those looking for jobs who've got a car. It's a bit of a strange one, but as I said a few minutes ago, it doesn't really matter. It was still relevant. I rescued it. I applied it back to the question. It's the language, not the content. Okay, it's the language. It's not your intelligence that's been tested. You just need to be on topic. That's it. So don't worry about that. How could public transportation be improved? I guess improving public transportation is kind of a difficult topic. It takes a lot of money, and it could be quite controversial as taxes would be used. However, to improve public transportation, I guess we could have better vehicles, we could have cleaner vehicles, we could have safer buses. For example, I remember when I was a student getting the night bus home to my student housing. In the evening there always used to be lots of drunk people, drunk students, drunk locals, and it wasn't the safest environment either. And always there used to be one person, usually the same person, who would stand up and start talking about the life problems. And it kind of made the trip a little bit uncomfortable. Maybe that's a little bit cold-hearted of me. However, I guess the ideal public transportation, the ideal bus route, or train ride, or tram ride would be safe, clean, cheap, and frequent and reliable. Those would be my main areas of concern off the top of my head. Okay, so there, gave a few reasons, I gave an example, and then I brought it back and I summarized it. And those are all definitely useful techniques to incorporate in your answers. Next question. Should city planners consider public transport when designing cities? Absolutely and undoubtedly yes. Definitely. The reason is because nowadays the cities have become 3D, i.e. they've built upwards and downwards, whereas transport is only 2D, except for maybe for double deckers, but transport has, especially public transport, has largely remained flat. So even though the capacity of the city, especially for population, has increased with skyscrapers and office blocks and all of those, the transport has largely remained 2D, which is why we've got traffic jams. So considering public transport at the very start could help to alleviate some of these issues. Okay, fortunately, I remembered an article by Elon Musk about 3D cities and him talking about Hyperloop and all of this. So this is why I could talk very confidently about this topic. And also, there's some good vocabulary there about alleviating traffic issues, and 3D cities and all the like. So not only did it make for an interesting city, but an interesting answer, it was also really on topic. And this is what comes from increasing the amount of reading you do, especially in the run-up to the exam. You want these ideas fresh in your head. You want the vocabulary fresh and the concepts so you can develop them easier. Next one. What can the government do to improve public transport outside of urban areas? To improve, buses and trains and the like in the rural areas outside of the city, perhaps local governments and central governments could offer subsidies to make it profitable for these companies, because I've heard that the reason why public transport outside of the city is rather poor is because it's simply not profitable. So subsidies could help. I guess they could also improve the infrastructure, because I remember in my village some of the roads were rather rickety and had the occasional pothole, so it made running buses, for example, on these routes more expensive because the cost of repairs would be much greater. Add that to the low amount of people and the low profitability, kind of all just compounds into making it unattractive for the private companies. Another possibility could be to actually develop public companies and just run those and increase taxes to pay for those. I guess there's lots of different answers, and it largely depends on the village or the rural area. Perhaps even subsidizing car ownership in those areas could be one possible solution. Anyway, in short, I think the government could just probably subsidize private transport companies to run routes in those areas. There we go. So I guess, again, I kind of weaseled out of that by saying it depends. I heard myself going off topic. I heard myself talking about subsidizing private car ownership, and then I quickly cut that short because I didn't really want to be going off topic, and I just brought it back to the original question. So there we go. Lots of sample answers there, and just to summarize of the techniques that you want to be incorporating, don't just focus on the techniques that I give you, but also remember to do your background reading, to make it a habit, to write down your topic-specific vocabulary, to read these interesting articles, and just to build your ideas. I remember Maria, who was going to Germany, who was a German student, she was going to Australia, she wrote out answers for all the cue cards she could find. And then when it came to it, she had an answer pretty much already prepared. Now, how genius is that? So, now, just to summarize the techniques I was using, I often paraphrased the question. I often gave two reasons. I often gave a list. I often compared those answers. I often gave a personal anecdote, and I nearly always summarized. And the advanced technique was, when I heard myself going off topic, I quickly rescued it and brought the next sentence to answer the exact question that was being asked. So that's it from me today. If you've got any questions, please get in contact. You can reach us at ben@IELTSPodcast.com, and remember to sign up to our newsletter, because we offer discounts there. We're getting lots of success from our students at the moment, and you're not in this alone, especially if you're in lockdown. We've just entered in lockdown now, and it's going to be a tough month. So we're all in this together. Let's make use of this time and keep our heads down, keep focused, and remember the goal. Remember the goal is to either get to Australia, get to the UK, start university, pass the exam, and get on with our lives. So we're here to help you, and please get in contact and we can help you even more. Take care and have a great day, and keep studying.
Thanks for listening to IELTSPodcast.com.